Hey everyone, welcome back to today's Explainer. We are diving headfirst into the bustling, hyperdynamic world of a completely free market economy. Just picture this, a landscape packed with private factories humming away, totally independent markets where business owners are operating with absolute freedom, and maybe a giant neon sign flashing Laissez, Faire, zero government interference. That is exactly the world we're unpacking today. It's an economic system that has literally shaped modern history, and we're going to look under the hood at the exact mechanics of how it actually works. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, ask yourself this. Who truly rules a free market economy? I mean, when you strip away all the regulations, the red tape, the central planning, who is actually pulling the strings? Who decides what gets built, what gets sold, and what gets completely abandoned? Is it the ultra-wealthy factory owners, the massive banks? Keep that question right in the back of your mind as we go through this, because the answer our source material gives us is absolutely fascinating, and honestly, maybe a little unexpected. So to answer that, we first need to define our terms. Section 1, what is capitalism? Right, so capitalism is basically a form of economic organization where the means of production, the factories, the land, the tools, are owned by private individuals, and they're operated strictly for profit. You'll also hear this called a free economy or a laissez-faire economy, which literally means complete non-interference by the government. Think about what that actually entails for a second. Every single economic activity, every trade, every business decision is carried out entirely by private individuals and institutions. Historically, this whole system erupted out of the Industrial Revolution in England, and today, it's the foundational framework for places like the US, the UK, and Japan, fundamentally shaping how we work, live, and buy. Now, what's really interesting here is how all these concepts come together to form the actual DNA of capitalism. It's basically a giant interconnected web. You've got private ownership and profit orientation acting as the core pillars. And from those pillars, you naturally get economic freedom, price determination by the market, minimal government intervention, and of course, competition. These aren't just isolated ideas floating around in some textbook. I mean, you simply cannot have prices determined by the market without true economic freedom, right? And you wouldn't have fierce competition without that underlying profit motive driving it all. Let's take a magnifying glass to the foundation of it all. That brings us right into Section 2, the power of ownership. The absolute defining feature of a capitalist economy is the existence of private property and the system of inheritance. In this world, everybody has a right to acquire private property and pass it on to their heirs. But here is the catch. Restrictions do apply. Even in a totally free, laissez-faire market, the right to property is not absolute. You can't just decide to use your privately owned resources to start manufacturing whatever you feel like. For example, our sources specifically note that you cannot freely produce war goods. It's kind of a fascinating paradox, right? A system defined by total ownership still has to draw lines in the sand. Building on that sense of ownership, we have the freedom of enterprise and contract. In this system, every single individual is free to start any business or choose literally any occupation they desire. You have total freedom to enter into any contract. You choose your path based entirely on your own abilities, your own training, and, well, your own ambition. There's no central authority tapping you on the shoulder dictating what your career has to be or what your factory absolutely must produce. The choice rests entirely in your hands. However, just like with private property, there are caveats to this freedom. For reasons like national security, public interest, or providing public utility services, individuals might be restricted from producing certain things. So while the system is remarkably free, it draws a hard line when the safety, functioning, or well-being of the broader public is at stake. Even a laissez-faire utopia recognizes that some boundaries are just necessary, to keep the whole engine running smoothly. All right, moving on to Section 3. The consumer is supreme. So, we are finally shifting our narrative from the producers to the buyers. Let's return to that question I asked you at the very beginning of this explainer. Who actually rules the market? Well, the consumer is treated as a king. That is the literal phrasing from our source material. In a capitalistic economy, you are completely free to consume any commodity up to any extent. And because of this dynamic, producers will only make the goods that are highly demanded by consumers. Think about it. If you, the consumer, don't want it, it simply doesn't get made. Ultimately, your freedom of consumption dictates the very nature of goods and services produced in the entire economy. So yeah, you're the one wearing the crown here. So the crucial point is how this unbelievably complex interaction of millions of consumers and producers actually gets organized without some central government planner calling all the shots. Adam Smith famously considered the price mechanism as an invisible hand. All economic decisions in the system are motivated by prices. It's this invisible hand that automatically solves the massive, incredibly complicated problems relating to production and consumption. Nobody is steering the ship, yet the ship knows exactly where to go. Pretty wild, right?
Let's break down exactly what that invisible hand is actually doing through the market mechanism. In this economy, the market determines the price of products and services, not the government. It's these totally organic market forces that determine how resources are allocated. They bring this automatic adjustment between our endless, varied human wants and our very scarce, limited resources. It's actually an incredibly elegant system of signals. When a price goes up, it acts like a flare in the night sky, signaling producers to make more of that product and signaling consumers to use less, balancing the scales automatically without a single law being passed.
Which perfectly sets up our final section. Section 4, the engine of profit. If the consumer is the king pointing the direction, what is the fuel actually driving the producers forward? Well, this brilliantly illustrates that driving force, the massive tension between maximizing profit and minimizing cost. Under capitalism, the main objective of absolutely every producer is to earn maximum profit. A producer will only make goods with a price as high as possible, and the cost to make it is as low as possible. Every single economic activity by an entrepreneur is guided by self-interest and the profit motive. It is the core objective that pushes individuals to innovate, invent, produce, and frankly, take massive risks with their own capital. But let's be real. Self-interest alone could easily lead to laziness if it was left unchecked. That's exactly why capitalism relies on fierce, relentless competition. There is a high degree of competition in both the commodity market, where everyday goods are sold, and the factor market, where labor and resources are bought. The result of all this? Extreme economic efficiency. Under competitive conditions, only the efficient firms survive. As a producer, you are literally forced to give your absolute best performance every single day. If you get comfortable, a competitor is going to undercut your prices, build a better product, and wipe you out entirely. We've seen how the laissez-faire system uses private ownership, consumer supremacy, and the fierce engines of profit and competition to automatically allocate resources. It's an incredibly powerful machine, but I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. If competition forces efficiency, and only the most efficient firms survive, what happens to those who simply cannot keep up in a completely laissez-faire world? It's a harsh but highly efficient reality, and it perfectly sets the stage for exploring the deep merits and demerits of capitalism in our next explainer. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you next time.